Trafficking is modern-day slavery. Human trafficking is actually a subcategory within human trafficking. It's pretty much commercial sex, and within this industry, they actually produce $150 billion, and the reason why they generate so much money, it's because it's a hidden crime. I say it's a hidden crime because there's a lot of physical and mental barriers. There's a lot of physical barriers in the sense that there's language barriers between victims and whoever they try to speak to about this, and there's already laws in place, but there's really no punishment for traffickers, and if there is, it's only minimal. And there's a lot of mental barriers for the victims because they live in fear because they don't know what could possibly happen if they do speak up, especially if their sponsors do find out, or what law enforcement would do. Not only that, a lot of victims don't actually know that they're actually traumatized being a part of being part of the sex trafficking business. And a lot of traffickers go after a lot of people, especially women, who have psychological and emotional vulnerability. There's a lot of economic hardship, and there's a lack of social safety, and there's a political instability within their country. And as you can see in the photo, we're gonna focus in Africa, and the countries of origin, these are pretty much people who are the victims, and as you can see in Africa, Nigeria is the reddest one, which means they're the highest rate. So, sex trafficking in Nigeria. Edo State is actually has the highest rate of international sex trafficking because of poor economic status. And with that, 32% of women actually said that they've been approached by someone asking if they would like to travel abroad, wanting to work abroad. And 40% of those women said that they received misled information in the sense that there was possibility of economic and job opportunities for them, and a possibility of marital status for them. And a lot of women do agree to assist them overseas because they have their own drive and motive, because they believe that working abroad will escape them from poverty. But then again, there's a lot of women are misled, which brings a huge problem for women because, again, this affects women's economic rights and security within globalization. There's a huge contradictory of this because their families are involved, which I'll explain later in my presentation. Also, it's a self-reproducing business. Again, I'll explain later in my presentation because women who are a part of this in the contract are women who used to be prostitutes. And not only that, women are seen as objects than individuals, so it's really making them not know what they're worth. So, yeah. So, we were just looking at countries of origin, and Nigeria is the highest. So we're going to look at countries of destination where victims in Nigeria are sent to. So does anyone want to know? Not the USA. It's actually in Italy. So in Italy in 2016, 181,000 women arrived in Italy, and 11,000 of them actually became prostitutes. And that's because a lot of them come to Italy before the demand of Italy's demand for low skilled labor. And however, there's a difference between the 1980s and now, because in the 1980s, women who came to Italy, they had more of a choice and option if they want to become prostitutes. It was more independent. And since the 1990s, Europe has made stricter laws and regulations for people to move and settle in Europe. So the Italian prostitution market thought this was a huge opportunity for them, in the sense that they could provide loans for women, to get them to come to Italy, because they'll promise good jobs and good jobs in order for them to repay them. However, again, like I said, 40% of women are misled in the information that are given. So with that, women in Nigeria, prostitutes in Nigerian prostitutes are actually paid the lowest rate in the Italian prostitution market, and with that they work in sub areas and alongside intercity highways. So the process of sex trafficking from Nigeria to Italy. So victims get in contact with smugglers, and these smugglers actually come from family and friends, and after that they get in contact with madams. And like I said earlier in my presentation, it's a reproducing cycle because these madams are women who used to be prostitutes, but because they couldn't officially get out of the business themselves, they continue to working for the business, for the industry. And these madams are the sponsors, so sponsors for those victims. So they pretty much bring them point A to point B, and the cost from traveling with documents are $500 to $2,000, and their travel costs $8,000 to $12,000. And however, these costs might seem low, but their debt actually ranges from $40,000 to $100,000, and those debt can actually increase, especially if those women do get in trouble. And once they come to Italy, their madams actually take away their documents, so it's harder for women to actually leave or get out of the business once they have an understanding of what they got themselves into. And again, I said this was a contradictory problem, especially with families, because their families actually encourage their daughters to participate in sex trafficking. So there's money coming in, income coming to the families, and within this contract that they sign, the family sign, they do this with religious or ritual performances. However, let's say a Nigerian woman comes back to her country. Typically just comes back to her country because she got kicked out, or she escaped, or she got pregnant. Her family still disowns her because they say that she goes against moral and religious norms since she participated in sex trafficking. So sex trafficking is a growing business. 18% of Nigerian women say that they feel like this business should continue growing because they personally feel like there's an economic and wealth gain. And however, girls are still vulnerable to sex trafficking because, again, Nigeria is a poor country. There's a high unemployment. There's poverty. There's no access for education is not accessible for women in a sense that they don't know what kind of sexual transmitted diseases they can get. Also, there's still that motive of working abroad will provide a better life for them. So again, there's a lack in Nigeria as a whole, there's a lack of women participating in Nigeria's economy, and again, the lack of knowledge of what could possibly happen to women physically and mentally if they participate in sex trafficking can do, and the lack of empowerment of women just knowing how much they're actually worth.